Okay. I'm just seeing who's here. I'm trying to see how many of you were here last week. I'm not sure how many of you were on last week and how many of you were not. The recording of last week will be up on YouTube later. I forgot to load it this week, but I'm going to put them both up after tonight. So if anybody wants to catch last week we covered a general intro to Hilchot Nida and a sort of a like overview of how a person becomes Nida and what's involved in making you Nida and how stains work and what a Hargasha is and some of that stuff. What we're going to do tonight is go into a little more detail about like what happens while we're Nida. So I'm going to do a super quick overview of the Harhakos. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to talk about it a little bit more from like a hashkafic perspective very briefly. And then I'm just going to like race through the details. I don't like teaching it like a laundry list, but this is a refresher course and I don't want to spend too much time going through it. If anybody has any thoughts on that or questions, you can definitely raise them. I'm going to be sending out a anonymous Q&A sheet for next week. Yeah, next Monday night. So I'll send it out tomorrow probably. So if you have any questions, you can put them on that form anonymously and we can discuss them. So if there's anything related to Harhakos that you wanted to discuss, you can put them in there. Hold on one sec. Hi. What's up? Okay, we just got started. Hi. This is way better for me because I don't like teaching a screen because no offense to all of you, but none of you have your cameras on. Okay, I just gave a summary of last week. So you guys are both good because you were here. Okay, so we're gonna jump in with Harhakos. Now it's not working. Very maybe not. Now it's not working. Oh no. Hold on. Oh no, I just have to click here. He told me this would happen. Okay. Harhakos. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Harhakos from a hashkafic perspective. Go back, that's fine, because of the screen. Okay. Oh no, the Hebrew went away. Okay, there was supposed to be a pasuk here in Hebrew on the right side of the page. I don't know where it went. But it's the pasuk that we, from Vayikra that we use. Oh, there it is. That was weird. Okay. Right? So a woman who is Nida, you're not supposed to come close to revealing her nakedness. So that's the pasuk where Chazal learn out this idea of Harhakos. What are Harhakos? They're essentially halacha that we use to help us maintain separation between us and our husband in our time of Nida. So obviously, why would we need Harhakos? What's the point of the Harhakos? Generally, a man and a woman who are forbidden to be together have an Isser Yichud. They're not allowed to be secluded together at all. We're not going to tell a husband and wife they can't live together half the month. That's obviously not very practical and not good for our marriage. So instead, we have sort of other ways of helping to prevent us as almost like a fence to stop us from accidentally transgressing Nida, whatever accidentally means, but we don't want to end up in a situation where we lose control and we make a mistake. And so we have all of these fences set up to help us. Some of the Harhakos are kind of intuitive, like you can see almost like in like a cheesy old movie from the 80s, like you can like imagine a woman like making the bed and being like, you know, making it all nice for the man and being like, come join me in bed, you know, and like sharing like Lady and the Tramp. I always think of Lady and the Tramp when I'm teaching not to share a plate, when like Lady and Tramp like share the spaghetti, like there is some romance involved. I always say to my colleagues, like if we went out to eat together, like to a restaurant and like you ate a French fry off my plate, like it would be awkward. Like we're not close enough for you to just like steal food off my plate. But it's like a given that you're going to do that with like your sister, your best friend, or like your husband. But like, you're not going to do that with like someone you're not super close with. It's like a sign of intimacy. So sharing a plate, eating each other's leftovers is some sign of intimacy. Does that mean that like, if I eat my husband's leftover chicken nuggets, that like, we're going to jump into bed like the next minute? Like nobody's saying that. We're not implying that it's like one directly leads to another, but it's about helping us create a mind frame to help us maintain that distance and awareness during the time. I would argue, as he wrote on the slide, like this is probably the hardest part of keeping Hilchot Nida. It's really, really challenging. And it's frustrating at times. And it does sometimes feel like a ton of details to kind of keep in mind. But I think that for some women, they do feel it gets easier over time. I definitely have felt that way. I remember when I learned it before I was even engaged, I took a course in Stern just on Hilchot Nida in general. And I remember being like, oh my God, like who could ever actually follow all these? And then I learned it as Kala again. And even though I already knew it, like learning it again, and knowing it was practical was like even scarier. And once you start living it, you kind of figure out like some of them just like don't ever happen in your life, and some do, depending on like the pattern of your lifestyle with your spouse and whatever. But I think one of the things, and we talked about this last time, which was, okay, there it is. We talked about this last time, this idea of being re'um ahuvim, that we're like both friends and lovers, and there's these two elements of our relationship. The time of separation is an opportunity to work on the friendship element of our marriage, and it's not necessarily easy. I'm gonna move these down here. Okay, it's not necessarily easy to do, but I think that it's something that can be very important in terms of making sure we don't forget to focus on that. And I spoke about this last time, but like sometimes we almost like use a physical touch as like an excuse to not express our feelings in other ways and not to show ways we care in other ways. And this gives us the opportunity to work on that. I just brought this quote. This is from an article on the Eden Center website. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Eden Center, it's well worth looking into. It's about women in Mikva and Taharat Hamishpacha in general. It's an organization out of Israel. They do a lot of really good work, and they're like very real. It's not one of these like, not that the other organizations aren't useful and wonderful, but like they own the difficulty. They talk about the real challenges that exist. They've done a lot of advocacy for women in Israel in terms of some of the issues with like the rabbanut and mikvaot and stuff like that. So it's a great article. If anybody wants to look it up, just go Google like Eden Center, Harhakos are hard. But this quote I thought really stood out to me. The Harhakos are hard. This is true. However, complete the thought. The fact that this is hard means I deeply love my spouse and I'm grateful for that awareness, right? If it wasn't hard, then I would be worried about you. If you were like, oh yeah, whatever, like I don't need to touch my husband for 2 weeks, like who cares? Well then like we should figure out what's going on in your marriage. Like you should want to touch each other. This should be difficult. I'm going to use this opportunity to show love in new and creative ways, maybe in conversation or thought, or through a small act of love that only my spouse will understand. Or this separation is a way for me to care for myself, a Shabbat for my body that reminds me to practice self-care and that rejuvenates me to give with a full heart. So I think this is another element of Harhakos that I heard a friend of mine once present on this, and she said, I teach this to my kalas, and it's like poof, over their heads, because like all they can think about is like being so excited to like move in with this guy and like live a life together and share their time together. But I don't know if anybody of you guys or you ever went to overnight camp. I was telling my daughter she's going for the first time this summer, assuming she gets on the plane and doesn't have a panic attack first, but hopefully she's going this summer. And she was like, I want a bottom bunk. I want a bottom bunk. I was like, I always wanted a bottom bunk when I was younger. And then I realized bottom bunk. Like I want to be on the top because then it's like my space. Nobody just happens to sit down on your bed when you're on the top. Right? It's like your little like Daled Amos of personal space that nobody can invade. Yeah, and when you're on the bottom, like somebody who lives on the top, they just needs to sit down and tie her shoes, and she's just like sitting right down on your bed. And like people just like kind of invade your space. And when you're in a bunk with 10 or 12 other girls, like you need that like 4 square feet of like personal, like, you know, nobody can touch me, nobody can talk to me. I'm in my little square now of like me. And when you're married, sometimes, especially if you're newly married and you've never lived together before, you've never shared a room before, you're in a very small apartment a lot of the time, sometimes it can feel like we're on top of each other all the time. I may be messy and he may be neat, or it could be the other way around. And there could be things like that we start to notice about each other that start to drive us a little crazy. And there's some element of nida, not that it makes it amazing, but there's almost like this refreshing element of like, these 12 days are my 12 days. My bed is my bed. You're not even allowed to sit on my bed. Like, this is my space for me to like have this moment to myself where my body is off limits and I don't feel bad about it because I'm not saying I'm not interested in you. Halacha is telling us we're not allowed. So like Chazal or the Torah can be the bad guys who are sort of like coming in and saying like, you guys need to chill a little bit. You guys need to break from each other. And I can like recoup and like get my space without feeling like I'm rejecting my husband. Because sometimes, I remember this when I was in my early days of marriage, he would just like come up behind me and like give me a hug. And I'd be like, why are you touching me? And he'd be like, what is wrong with you? Like, I'm just trying to show you I love you. I'm like, I'm in the middle of washing the dishes. You're interrupting me. And he would be like, I don't understand. But when you're nida, like, you're not that, you know, rude, rejecting person who's saying like, leave me alone. You just get that space. And by the time you come back, hopefully if things are good, you're excited to come back and you're excited for those moments because you miss them and it gives you the opportunity to enjoy them again. So it's just another element. I'm not saying it makes things good. I'm not saying it makes things easy. These halachot are annoying. I'm not going to pretend they're not, but I do think that being able to see what it brings to us can sometimes be helpful. Okay. I keep There we go. Okay, so basically in the Harhakos, we have the following, okay? So since relations are usually permitted, we need extra fences to prevent it. So we basically have two categories. We've got the Deoraita, and then we've got the Derabanan, and then we also have some that are more like Minhagim or later additions, such as like passing, for example, is something that is like only comes up. Tosfot talk about how their grandfather Rashi didn't pass the key to his wife. That's where we get the halacha of not passing from. So it's a much later addition. I would argue that even though passing is a later addition, it's actually one of the more worthwhile ones keeping because it really helps you just like stay in a good mind frame and like not forget. It's the one that comes up the most. But it's definitely, if you're not able to keep them all the ones to drop, that might be one of the first, just because halachically it carries a little bit less weight. It is halacha, it's in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's not as big of a deal as some of the earlier ones. So according to most opinions, any kind of affectionate touch is asur d'oraisa, meaning it is forbidden on a Torah level. And then other physical contact, a high five, a handshake, I don't know what else would be going on, would be considered only an isur d'Rabbanan. And any other kinds of harchakot are going to be d'Rabbanan. So we basically have 5 categories. So we're going to go through this really fast because what I really want to get to is the other stuff. And I think most of you know it, but I do think it's important to just like see it because sometimes we forget these things and like we've maybe had a long period of either birth control or pregnancy or something like that where we haven't kept these halachot, and it's important to remind ourselves what they are. But there's basically 5 categories. Number 5 is not really a category. It's just a separate thing I need to discuss. 4 categories: touching halachot, eating halachot, bedroom halachot, sitting on the same object, okay? So with touching, you can't touch. Again, affectionate touch is d'oraisa, other touch is probably d'Rabbanan. Passing is an issue. According to Rav Willig, he says you can pass a baby. Certainly once the baby is old enough to like pass itself, meaning it's old enough to like turn and reach out for the other parent, at that point, it wouldn't be an issue. But in terms of like a more newborn baby, this is a debate between different people, and Rav Willig feels pretty strongly. I think he once saw people putting like the car seat like on the roof of a car and seeing it start to like slide down the roof, and he was like, we don't need to be this machmir. Like, let's not put babies in danger. Pass the baby carefully. Obviously, if you can put the baby down and the baby's not going to be fussed by it and it's no big deal, then maybe that would be better. But like, if you can't, that's okay. Throwing is an Ashkenazi thing. If you toss something up in the air and then it comes down and the other person catches it, that's generally considered to be okay. But throwing directly to each other would be an issue. Not to throw, or that you can throw it up? Really? Oh, it's definitely in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Ramah. But and then attached to all that is like all these complicated questions, like, can you play catch? Well, not if you can't throw, but can you play tennis? Well, maybe that's okay because like you're hitting it and then it's bouncing, it's coming back. There's all these discussions about this stuff. Another option is like if you can't pass the keys, so like if you have a pocketbook, a purse or something like that, hold it open, your husband can drop the keys inside, or he can just reach into your purse himself and take them out. If you are in a private space, it's much easier to like, you know, let's say you're in a stairwell, you need to give each other the keys to the apartment to like put it down on the step and he can pick it up. But if people are around, that can be awkward. So that's where the like tossing it up and looking like you're kind of playing around kind of thing works. We do that a lot. My kids like are always like, you guys are such good throwers. And we're like, they never notice it only happens sometimes, but whatever. Okay, eating harchakot, a heker. A heker is something, it literally means like lahakir, to recognize. It's a reminder. You only need it on the table when you're eating alone. If there are other people at the table, it's not necessary. It's there to remind you of all the halachot around eating. You should not share plates. So if you have, let's say you're watching a movie, you want to eat some popcorn, you should really bring a bowl of popcorn and 2 separate bowls. Take the popcorn from the main bowl, put it in your bowl, eat it. It's also kind of helpful in terms of like not eating so much popcorn that then you feel like you want to throw up because you have a smaller bowl, just from personal experience. I'm not into dieting at all, like all about the intuitive eating, but when you're watching a movie, you do not intuitively eat your popcorn. You just stuff your face and feel disgusting afterwards. What do you mean? It's true. Also, regular popcorn I get bored of fast. Chicago mix is like, okay, mixture of cheddar cheese popcorn and caramel popcorn. I literally could eat a whole bag in one sitting. It's disgusting. It's really bad. Yummy. Okay. Okay, so don't share plate. Serving plates, you can have the same serving plate and each take from the serving plate, but you shouldn't eat off the serving plate. You shouldn't serve each other foods or drinks in the normal way, but you can just do a shinui, meaning doing it a little bit differently. This is from the Gemara, so this is like pretty real stuff in terms of like how much weight it carries halachically. Okay, leftovers. For food or drink, it's only an issue for him to have your leftovers. You're allowed to have, did somebody just write a comment? Somebody's name just popped up. Hold on. I don't think so. Nope, okay. Okay, so he's not allowed to eat your leftovers. So this is like really good if you are proprietary about your food, a good time to go to a restaurant and order fries and not have to share them, just saying. So you can eat his leftovers. He cannot eat yours unless you've left the table, they've been transferred to another plate, he doesn't know they're yours, or somebody else ate from it in between. So if you're out at a restaurant with all your kids and your kids ate from it and then he eats the rest, that would be okay. It's more of like a direct transfer from you to him. It's just a way of like taking the intimacy out of it. Sending a glass of wine, this one always like just resonates with me. Like it's so obvious because it's like out of that cheesy movie in the 80s again, like some cute girl's at the bar and all of a sudden the bartender comes, he's like, brings her a drink and she's like, where'd this come from? He's like, see that guy over there? He bought it for you, or he sent it for you. And he's like winking at her. So that's this idea of like sending somebody a glass of wine, designating a glass of wine for you can be in some ways an intimate thing. This comes up most frequently at Kiddush, right? So let's say you're at the Shabbos table, your husband makes Kiddush and he pours out wine and he hands it to, you know, somebody to pass it to you. Even though there's someone else passing it to you and he's not passing directly to you, it's still an issue because he is giving you a cup of wine that he designated for you. The solution to this is either he can put the wine down right in front of him and you can grab it because he didn't give it to you. He just put it down and you took it from him, and then you can drink his leftovers and then he can't have it back. So you can finish the glass of wine. Or he can pour a bunch of them and pass around all the cups and you just take one of them. So you're not taking one. It's not like he gives it to your kid and says like, go give this to Ima, but he's just giving out a whole tray of cups and you take your own. So those are options for that. That's also the reason why at Sheva Brachos, we do this whole like funny potion situation with the mixing of the cups and splitting them around. It's because we don't want the couple to drink from each other's cup and for him to give her a cup. Just random trivia. If you were engaged, I would like explain to you what's going on now at Sheva Brachos, but we don't need to worry about that. Okay, bedroom halachot. Okay, sharing beds. A couple cannot sleep in the same bed. Okay, they should separate their beds just enough so that blankets and pillows don't touch. It's okay if it's one headboard, but the actual beds need to be separated. Making beds. A wife cannot romantically make the bed in front of her husband. This is like fluffing up the pillows and making it look nice and inviting. But like the hard work of like putting the fitted sheet on the mattress, which like no one likes doing and is not like adorable or sexy in any way. It's just like annoying. That is fine to do in front of your husband because you're like breaking a sweat and you're probably not looking your best. But if you're like making the bed and like making it look pretty, just do it when he's not in the room or tell him he has to do it. That's also an option. Or you can be like me and my husband and never grow up and still not make your beds. Okay. Sitting or lying on each other's bed. So this is a little bit stricter on the husband than it is on the wife. I'm not going to get into all this now, but some of the reasons behind it being stricter for the husband than for the wife just has to do with like our general sexual arousal cycles and how men tend to be more stimulated by like actual physical stimuli, whereas women need more of an emotional connection. This is like Chazal clearly knew what Masters and Johnson were going to discover when they started studying sexual behavior in like the 60s and 70s. I think that's when they were, but basically he cannot lie or sit on your bed when you're home, but if you're not home, he can sit on your bed. You, however, should not lie on it unless he's not there, but you can sit on it if he's in the room, okay? So it's just a slight difference. If your room is big enough and there's plenty of space and you can't remember these details, just sit on your own beds and like you won't have an issue. If you're ever like on a cruise ship or in somebody's guest room where it's like a high riser and like one bed is up against the wall and there's a dresser there and then like the other bed, it's like really tight, you should have the inside bed. Because if he needs to sit down to tie his shoes, he can sit on his own bed. And if you need to sit down, you're allowed to sit on his bed. So give him the outside, easily accessible bed and give you the harder to access bed so he doesn't need to sit on it. But other than that, hopefully you have enough space in your general everyday lives that it's not too much of a concern. Just try not to sit on each other's beds and then you don't have to remember all these details. Okay, seeing her undressed. This isn't really a bedroom harhaka, but it just kind of like goes there. So the issue with seeing her is the term the halacha uses is lehistakel, which means to gaze. We're not talking about just glancing and happening to see something, like getting changed in front of him, unless he's like staring at you and it's like a whole sort of striptease situation, that would for sure be not okay. But if he just happens to see something, that's not the issue. The issue is him like looking at you with enough looking, that he gets some enjoyment from it. That's the concern. And it's any parts of your body that are usually covered when the two of you are together. So we aren't talking about that are usually covered like when you're out at store. We're talking about that are usually covered like day to day. So if you usually sleep in a sweatpant and sweatshirt, you should sleep in that when you're nida. If you usually sleep in a tank top and shorts, you could sleep in a tank top and shorts when you're nida. But if you generally don't wear a tank top and shorts day to day, this is based on Rav Moshe Feinstein, by the way. They're not everybody agrees with this, but Rav Moshe Feinstein says, if you generally wouldn't wear a tank top and shorts to sleep most of the time, you shouldn't go and do that when you're nida. Obviously, if it's like a heat wave and your air conditioning broke and like whatever, we're not talking about that. But even then, like maybe don't be in your bra, right? Like just sort of be sensitive to the idea of like whatever he's used to seeing is fine. Whatever he's not used to seeing is going to be an issue. That's what Rav Moshe says, which is also where he paskins that women can uncover their hair when they're nida. There are some communities where the minhag is that women cover their hair while they're nida and like try to be as covered as possible. But I would say most people go like Rav Moshe in our community, and it's fine to go according to that. Okay, sitting on the same object. This is in Hebrew called safsal hamitnadned, which seems to be referring to like one of those like swings that, like a bench swing that people have on their front porches. The Shulchan Aruch talks about it. So this is the idea of any time that you sit down and like he can feel your movement, or he sits down and you can feel his movement. So like going on a canoe or like a rowboat, like getting on a motorboat together probably isn't as much of an issue because it's like big and you don't necessarily like, I mean, I guess if you like really tried to like bounce, you could like tip each other over, but you're not trying to like, you're not every little time, like if you're in a canoe together, every time somebody just goes like that, the whole thing, you like feel it move. That's the concern. You don't want to be able to feel each other's movement. The same seat of like the back row of a car, let's say you take an Uber together, that wouldn't be a problem because you can't like really feel each other's movement in the car. If you're in a situation where you can't avoid sitting on the same couch cushion, going on the same paddle boat or something because you're, I don't know, on some trip with your kids, you don't have a choice, put something in between yourselves. It's called the davar hamafsik, basically like a machitza between you two, like either a cushion, like if you're on a couch at somebody's house and the only seats left are on the same couch cushion and it's like awkward for you to stand. So like sit down and then take one of the throw pillows or take your bag or take something and stick it between you as like a reminder that you shouldn't really be sitting on the same cushion. Okay, if somebody is ill, if you're cholesh yesh bo sakana, like actually seriously ill, there's any kind of concern of danger, you don't need to worry about harhakos. If you're not seriously ill, like you're just not feeling well, generally we say passing, pouring, and serving would be okay at that point, but touching, it's really better not to. It's better if the wife is the one who's healthy and she has to touch him, that's a little bit more lenient than the husband touching her. But again, if it can be avoided, it should be avoided. But if you need to bring them food or pour them a cup of water or make them a cup of tea or any of those things, that would all be like totally fine. And if the person is in any way, like even remotely, scary sick, don't worry about the harhakos at all. Okay, Tishb and Yom Kippur. We're a little bit stricter on Yom Kippur than we are on Tishb just because Yom Kippur is a Torah level and Yom Kippur and Tishb is rabbinic. But basically you should not share a bed and you should not touch at night on Tishb, and the same thing basically all day on Yom Kippur. During the day, we're more lenient about the harhakot on Tishb. Again, like, I don't know what you're doing on Tishb, but like, I don't really think this is super relevant. But there's no sexual intercourse allowed on Tishb or Yom Kippur. The mikvahs are closed. There's only 2 days of the year that the mikvahs are closed. So the harhakos is just a way of making sure that even if you're tahor, you should still keep these harhakos when on those days, just to remind yourself what's going on. Next. Okay. Oh, this is the one that had, okay. Okay, becoming Tohora. So basically in the process of becoming a Tohora, you're going to have 5 steps. Okay, so we're going to go through each one. I think we'll get through them all. If we don't, I'm going to save Mikva for next time. I really want to make sure to get clarity on numbers 1, 2, and 3, because I think that's where there's often a lot of confusion and people end up waiting too many days or not counting properly and getting confused. So I think that it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time on those, but if we get through them, okay, we'll continue with 4 and 5. If not, I will push those to next week and we'll just start off next week with a little bit on Mikva and then we'll finish off with the other topics we were going to do next week. Okay, the 5-day wait. So for Sephardim, sorry, I forgot to capitalize yes. For Sephardim, it's a 4-day wait. I'm going to just call it the 5-day wait. We're going to talk about the 5-day wait, but if you know you wait 4 days, that's okay. It's the same thing, okay? Oh, went too fast. Okay, these are the important principles you need to know, okay? There's a really, really, really big nafkamina, a really big practical difference between the 5-day wait and the 7 clean days. And you have to remember this difference because either you're gonna remember it wrong and you're gonna be too machmir, or you're gonna remember it wrong and you're gonna be way too mako on your 7 clean days. So it's very important, okay? The 5-day wait begins as soon as you start bleeding. If you get your period on Monday afternoon at 4:30 and sunset is at 5 o'clock, Monday is day 1 of your 5 days. It's only half an hour long, but it's still day 1 of your 5 days. Any element of a halachic day counts for your 5 days, okay? So if you have your choice, which I don't see why you would, but I guess maybe if your pill timing works out this way, it's better to get your period later in a day, right before Shkia, because then you get like to move through your 5 days faster. So your 5-day wait is, it begins as soon as you get your period, and that first day is day 1. So if you get your period Monday night at 9 p.m., Tuesday is your first day because halachically it's already Tuesday. So you have 5 days from when you started bleeding, and on the 5th day, you don't have to wait for day number 5 to be over. On the 5th day, you can do your hefsek tahara, which we'll talk about in a second, exactly what is a hefsek, what is required. But on day 5, you can do your hefsek if you're done bleeding. If you're Sephardic, or you have another reason why you are allowed to wait 4 days, which we'll get to in a second, you can do it on the 4th day. If you're still bleeding, and when I say bleeding, we talked about this last week, I mean red uterine blood, not just like some brown discharge. We're talking like you're really still bleeding. Obviously, you're not going to do your hefsek at that point. But once the 5 days have passed, for that nida period, until you become Tohora again, there's no like new 5 days. So let's say you do your 5-day wait, you do a hefsek Sara, you start counting your 7 clean days, and on the 1st or 2nd day of your 7 clean days, you get a bad badika, it's got red on it, no luck, you're out of luck, you got to start again. You do not need to count 5 days. The 5 days are finished. Once you have fulfilled your requirement to count 5 days, you're good to go with the 5 days until the next time you become nida, okay? The only time that would not be true is if, God forbid, you have a big mess up and you actually have sex during nida, because the real reason for the 5-day wait is a woman who's emitting semen. I didn't bring all this now because it's like very technical and gets a little bit complicated, and I didn't want to like bog us down with the details. But if a woman is emitting semen during her 7 clean days, she cannot count her 7 clean days. That's the whole reason why we wait 5 days. So certainly in that scenario, that would be an issue. But assuming that is not the case, once you've done your 5 days, you are finished, done, no issue. You can, every time you bleed, you can do another badika half an hour later. That can be your new hefsek. It doesn't matter, okay? So you only need partial days. And on day 5, you can do your hefsek, or day 4, okay? So cases where an Ashkenazi woman could wait 4 days, okay, if she has extenuating fertility issues, if her husband is going away on a trip, these all require speaking to someone, but it's just worth knowing them because you might want to ask the question. A kala after her wedding, we're not going there now. If you're supposed to go to the mikvah on the 2nd night of Yom Tov, some posting will let you shorten your 5-day wait so that you can work it out so you can go to the mikvah on the 1st day of Yom Tov, because going on the 2nd day of Yom Tov can be stressful. Not everybody agrees to that, but it's something to know about. If you anticipate that happening and you happen to have a short period, it's worth asking the question. Can't hurt to ask. The worst case scenario is you hear no, that sucks, and you move on with your life. Cases where a woman does not have to wait any days. So this is what I was saying before. If she sees blood during the 7 clean days, then she is not required to start counting 5 days again because she already counted her 5 days. She's like fulfilled her obligation this time around. She doesn't need to do it again. If she sees blood after the mikvah, but she hasn't yet gotten home, like I hope this doesn't happen to anyone because it's like the most frustrating thing ever. I did once postpartum have this happen. It wasn't that bad. It was 2 days, I think. It took me forever to get a shibboleth. I finally got a shibboleth. I went to the mikvah, and literally 2 days later, I started bleeding all over again and had to like start all over again. So frustrating, but it does happen sometimes postpartum, or if you are going through like menopausal spotting or things like this. If you haven't even gotten home from the mikvah, or you haven't even been together since you went to the mikvah, there's room not to count those 5 days. The 5 days start from when you become halachically forbidden to your husband. So the other thing is, let's say you had your veset and you didn't bleed during your veset, and then that night your period came. So that would probably be room to count that as your first day, the veset, when you separated from each other because you were halachically forbidden to each other, and now you've gotten your period. It's worth asking. It depends how much time you've spent together since then, because you were technically halachically permissible to each other. But these are the kinds of things. Once you've been halachically forbidden to each other, that counts your 5-day wait. So that's where you start counting from, okay? Any questions on the 5-day wait? Okay, so in our scenario, you got your period on Monday afternoon at 4 p.m. Okay, that's going to be our scenario for tonight. So Monday's your day 1. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can do your hefsek on Friday, okay? Why does it keep doing that? Okay, what is a hefsek? I did not mean to make this like come up one at a time. It's very annoying for me. Okay, important principles. Okay, important principles. It has to be done before sunset on the day before you intend to begin to count your 7 clean days. So what does that mean? We said you have to wait 5 days and then you can count your 7 clean days. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, your 7 clean days are going to begin on Shabbos, Friday night. When the sun sets on Friday, it becomes Saturday, halachically, and at that point, your 7 clean days start. Now, the big difference between the 7 clean days and the 5-day wait is that the 7 clean days must be full, complete, continuous halachic days. If you do your hefsek Tara an hour after Shkia on Friday evening, you can't count your 7 clean days now because Friday night began, Shabbos began, and your day 1 of your 7 clean days was not a full, complete halachic day, and therefore you are in trouble. So you need to make sure you do your hefsek Tahara before sunset on either day 5 or any day thereafter that you've stopped bleeding. Are you taking pictures of every slide? I could just send you the slides. Yeah. I'm happy to send out the slides to everybody. Okay, so that is the most important thing to remember. Now, many of you were probably taught by your Halal teacher that you should do your hefsek like within 2 hours of Shkia on that day. Now, we all know in our scenario where I got my period on Monday afternoon and I have to do my hefsek on Friday afternoon and my kids get home from school starting around 1:30 on Friday afternoon, the chances of me actually successfully doing that hefsek and remembering to do it are pretty slim to none. Even if my husband calls me and texts me and reminds me, I will still forget because I often do, right? So it's very important to know. It can be done in the morning. Is that the halachically ideal time to do your hefsek? No. But if you do a badika on Friday morning when you wake up, as long as the sun is out, assuming you're done bleeding, because sometimes you bleed Friday morning, but by Friday afternoon, you could get a good hefsek. But Friday morning, you maybe couldn't. So obviously that's not going to help. But assuming you're done bleeding enough on Friday morning that you can get an okay hefsek Friday morning, do a badika Friday morning so that in case you miss it on Friday afternoon, you can count that badika from the morning, b'diavad, like it's not the ideal time to have done it, but b'diavad, that badika counts. And now you can start your Shiva Nikiyim, your 7 clean days, Friday evening when the sun sets. So always, if it's the day you're supposed to do a hefsek, always try to do it in the morning. You can put it in your phone, you can set your alarm clock to go off, hefsek or HT if you don't want your kids to see what it is. My kids always hear my husband say things about badikas, either about somebody else's badika or my badika, and they're like, why are you checking for chametz? Like literally all the time they ask us that. I think finally my oldest is starting to catch on, but the other ones are like, why are you always looking for chametz? We're like, yep, looking for chametz. Okay, so you can do it in the morning. So it's really, really important to remember that. If you remember and if you have the time and if you're able to do one within 2 hours-ish of Shkia, that is better. But if you didn't, it totally counts. There's no issue. So you should try to do it in the morning to save yourself the anguish of missing the day. Let's say Friday is not a good example because most of us know what time Shkia is on Friday because like we have to light candles. Let's say I got my period Sunday, so I can do my hefsek on Thursday. And it's like, I don't know, Shkia these days is like 5:45-ish, I think. So let's say it's like 5:38 and I look at the clock and I'm like, oh my God, I need to do a hefsek. What time is Shkia? Don't look it up. Go do a badika, check what time it is when you do the badika, and then look it up after, because it's always better to get it done before Shkia. If it's within 3, 4, 5 minutes of Shkia, even 10 according to some poskim, it's worth asking a question, because do keep in mind that like we did not used to have like digital like atomic clocks like down to the second that like our iPhones knew exactly what time it was. Things were a little bit more like gray when it came to the timing of Shkia back in the day. And so different poskim have different amounts of time that they'll give you as like leeway after Shkia. But don't waste your time calling to ask the rabbi, well, how much longer after Shkia are you going to give me if I did my badika late? Like just go do the badika, check what time it was and ask the question later. Because worst case scenario, it was way too late. You missed your chance and you did an extra badika, but like who cares? Better to do the badika than to miss your chance to do the badika. Okay. So as the hefsek we're going to talk about in a second has 4 parts to it. The only one that actually matters in terms of making it halachically valid is the badika. If you miss any of the other 3, it still counts. So just keep that in mind. You just did a badika in the morning, you didn't wash yourself out, you didn't put your wet underwear yet, it doesn't matter. The badika is a hefsek. You can count it as a hefsek, which is also why If during your 7 clean days, you had a question and you did another badika and you found out later that the question you had was bad, that new badika that you did next can count as a new hefsek retroactively, even if you didn't do the other stuff, because the badika itself is all that truly matters for the hefsek. You missed your badika, it's not a hefsek. You can wash yourself as much as you want. If you didn't do the badika, it's not a hefsek. But if you forgot to wash yourself, forgot to change your underwear, didn't do a moftachok, which we'll talk about in a second, then all of that would be still fine. It still counts as a hefsek, okay? Hefsek, tahara, hefsek, all the same thing. Just make sure that's clear. Okay, I don't know where all these fancy animations came from, but it's really driving me nuts. Okay, 4 steps. Okay, you're gonna clean yourself. Ideally, this should be a full shower if you can, but at the minimum, just wipe yourself well. If you're at work or at the mall or something, you could just take a paper towel, wet it a little, go into the stall and wipe yourself. There are some women who swear by doing a douche. Word of caution with douches. Number 1, do not get scented. That is number 1. Number 2, you need to know your body. Some women will tell you doing a douche once a month just for this purpose doesn't mess with them. Other women, it messes with their pH balance and they get a yeast infection like almost immediately from doing a douche. So do not know, if any color teacher taught you, you need to do a douche, you do not need to do a douche. You do not. If you find it helps you and it doesn't mess you up, then by all means go ahead, but don't buy the scented one. It's really not good for you. So what's the point of the douche? The hefsek tara badika is looking forward. It's basically saying, up until this moment, I was bleeding. Starting now, when I did this badika, I'm saying going forward, I'm not bleeding. Whatever I did 30 seconds ago, 2 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, doesn't really matter because I'm bleeding starting now. I'm not bleeding starting now. So what does the douche do? If there's any leftover little bits of remnants of blood that were still there that would have come out on the badika, the douche might clean you out enough. Now, if you're really still bleeding, like you're putting on white underwear, you're gonna find it. So you're not like cheating. However, if you are going to do a douche, or even if you're just gonna use a handheld shower and use it to clean yourself out really well, don't do the badika right away because you're really gonna hurt yourself. It really dries you out. It takes away, not in addition to any blood, it's gonna take away any like natural mucus and lubricant that's there that you need to do a badika comfortably. So you should not do it right away. You should allow yourself enough time before shkia to wash yourself out and give yourself 20 minutes, half an hour before you go do the badika so that you don't scratch yourself because your vaginal walls can be very, very dried out. I know that's illogical. My kids never understand. I'll be like, oh, you were in the pool for a long time. Your skin is dry. And they're like, but I was wet. I'm like, no, not the same kind of dry. You don't want to dry yourself out and then go do a badika. You're more likely to cut yourself or just hurt yourself or find it really, really hard to get that badika cloth around. Some of you probably had that experience before. So no matter how you're going to clean yourself out, give yourself a little bit of time. If you're just wiping externally, it's not going to give you an issue, but any kind of internal cleaning, give yourself a break in between the cleaning and the badika, just like for like comfort and safety. So cleaning yourself out, at the very least, you should just wipe yourself. Then you're going to do a badika. Okay, this is where I wrote required. Again, the badika is the hefsek. The hefsek is nothing without its badika. They go hand in hand. In terms of badiko, there's basically 2 discussions in the Gemara, 2 ideas in the Gemara, and they discuss which one is required. One of them is called chorin stuck in, which means like cracks and crevices. And the other one is ad hamakom de shamish dash, that like as far as the penis can thrust inside of a woman during intercourse. Okay, what do they decide? You don't need to go as deep as a penis can go, but you do need to do all the cracks and crevices. So however deep you're able to get, once you get that deep, you need to make sure to get all the cracks and crevices in your vaginal wall from that point. So if you can only get in this much because you've got some pain or you've got an issue, or for a newly married woman who has no sexual experience, this can be an issue. If you can only get in like this much, that's okay. But once you get in that much, you need to get all the cracks and crevices on the way back down. So the way I usually teach my colleagues to do it is, I should have brought my pop-up book again. You put your finger with the badika cloth wrapped around inside as far as you're comfortably able to get, and then do concentric circles on the way back down so that you get all the cracks and crevices on your way out. If you go in and start going like this and whatever, you could miss something, and you're also going to end up going over the same spot over and over again and potentially scratching yourself, drying yourself out, can be more uncomfortable. So this is for all badikot, it's true. Just the easiest way I found to do it is to go inside as much as you're able to, and then do circles all the way back down, coming out so you get all your cracks and crevices. You only have to go as deep as you can go. Obviously, you do need to go internally a little bit, but if you can't go very far for whatever reason, that's okay. Generally, women do find over time they're able to get in a little bit more. Obviously, if they have any kind of medical condition like vaginismus or something like that, this is a much bigger conversation. We can talk about it offline, but that's generally guidelines for badikot. Okay, so the badika of the hefsek tara, like I said, is only looking forward, which means The last badika you do counts. Okay, so you can do, if you wanted, and I would not suggest this, but you could do 20 badikot for your hefsek. And then if the last one is good, even if all the 19 before it were red, that's fine. Okay. If you do that, you're going to hurt yourself. So just bear that in mind. Now you could try one in the morning, and if it's no good, you could try again 2 hours later, and that might be fine because maybe you were just like finishing up and you're okay now. But I wouldn't suggest sitting there and doing like badika after badika after badika, because it's the same issue as using a douche. You're going to dry yourself out. You're going to scratch yourself. You're going to get hurt. Then you're going to find blood on your badika cloth from the scratch. And then we don't want to go down that road. So you have to be kind of like, logical, but you can only count the last one you did. People sometimes get confused and they're like, oh, my college teacher told me I can try as many hefseks as I want. And they take like 5 of them and they line them up on the counter and like, which one looks best? We're not at the ice cream store. We don't get to pick our favorite flavor. It's the last one you did. And that is all. There's no like way around that, because it's basically saying from this point forward, I'm not bleeding. So the only one that counts is the last one that you did. So if at a certain point you just want to recognize the fact that you're not done bleeding, give up, try again tomorrow. It sucks, but you don't need to make yourself crazy. Okay, the moch. The moch is a very strong minhag, but it is not going to invalidate your hefsek. If it causes you any discomfort, any problems, any issues, if you have like, any kind of problems postpartum or anything like that, skip it. The moch is essentially, it means a pushed cloth. It's taking a badika cloth and sticking it inside internally from in between sunset and stars coming out after having done your hefsek, to sort of ensure that you truly are not bleeding as you enter your 7 clean days. If you're able to do it, it should be done. It is in the halacha svarim, but it is definitely the first thing to go if it's causing you any kind of issues or problems. You shouldn't do it. And the other thing that you should just know about it is if you're ever somewhere for Shabbos and there's no eruv, the moch is considered carrying. So if it's Shabbos, you're doing your hefsek and you're somewhere without an eruv, do not put in a moch, or don't go out for those 20 minutes or whatever. Okay, white underwear. You should change into your white underwear after doing your badika so that any further blood that you have coming out, we would be able to identify. If you can't get white underwear, let's say you went to work and you forgot you had to do your hefsek that day, and you keep badika cloths in your purse, but you don't necessarily keep underwear in your purse, right? So what should you do? Do the badika, don't worry about it. You could put in a white panty liner if you need to, but at the bare minimum, the underwear, and this doesn't really apply to us nowadays because like, thank God we have multiple pairs of underwear and we do laundry. This is more applicable back in the day, I think, but you don't want it to have any stains on it that could cause confusion. You don't want to end up in a situation where there's like an old brownish stain and you're like, oh wait, is this from today or from last time? You want it to be clean. So even if you don't have white underwear available, it should at least be clean underwear. And if you don't have that, put a panty liner in so that at least you can deal with that issue. Okay, any questions about the hefsek? If you guys are on Zoom, just unmute yourselves because I have too many things open on my screen. I can't see the chat. Let's see, is there a chat? Ooh, no chat, okay. See, now it's not letting me click again, okay. Okay, 7 clean days, which is also referred to as the Zayin Nikim, the Shiva Nikim. I kind of use them interchangeably, so I just put it all there so you wouldn't be confused if I say them all. These need to be 7 full continuous halachic days. So this, again, I've said this already, but I just want to make sure it's clear. The 5-day wait, you can start counting in the middle of a day, and that still counts as a day. You can do your hefsek on the 5th day. 7 clean days from the Torah, they're a different ball game. You need to have 7 full days that have to start at Shkia, at sunset, which is why the hefsek needed to take place before sunset. So in our scenario, I got my period on Monday afternoon. I'm doing my hefsek on Friday, probably doing a badika in the morning because I'm going to forget in the afternoon. And then when the sun sets on Friday afternoon, my 7 clean days begins. Okay. You should do 1 or 2 badikot a day. This is depending on who you were taught by and who your posek is. Rav Willig holds 1 badika a day. The Shulchan Aruch says 2. If you can't do them every day because you're experiencing discomfort or have some kind of an infection or you have issues, or you forgot, the only ones that really matter are days 1 and day 7. Okay, so I put that in red for you. Day 1 and 7 must happen. Any other days, if you forgot, you don't even need to call me, you don't even ask anybody, you can just move on. If you have a psak that you shouldn't do so many badikot for whatever reason, maybe you have a very delicate vaginal wall and you hurt yourself easily, maybe there's some other issue going on, you really should not just do day 1 and 7 because you need bookends. Basically, you can't have more than 5 days go continuously without a badika. So if you did a badika on day 1 and then you didn't do one on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you do another badika on day 7, you only had 5 days without a badika in between. Let's say you do a bedika on day 1 and you don't do one for the next 5 days and you forget on day 7. According to most opinions, you need to start all over again, which is killer. So if you do one on day 1 and one on day 2 or 3, ideally 2, because the chances of you forgetting 7 and 8 are pretty slim. What then will happen is day 1 will become irrelevant. Day 2 will become your new day 1. And day 8 will become your new day 7. And you'll still only have 5 days in between with no bedika, and you'll be okay. And you'll just have to go to the mikvah 1 day later instead of 7 days later. Nobody wants to go to the mikvah 7 days later. But if you have a lot of issues, doing bedikas 2 days in a row might be problematic. So in that case, maybe do day 1 and day 3. So you may have to wait an extra 2 days, but at least you won't cut yourself or hurt yourself. But if you're able to do a bedika every day, you really should. That is the halacha. If you can't, that's okay. If you can only do day 1 and 7, you still get a shiva nikiyim that counts halachically. The other ones in between will not affect your shiva nikiyim, but you really should, if you're able to, try to do one every day. But again, if Tuesday got crazy and you just couldn't get it done, it's not going to affect you as long as you have your day 1 and your day 7. Okay, you should wear white underwear, or at the very least, it needs to be
clean. Ask a question?
Yeah, sure, please.
Because I thought shiva nikiyim always has to start with a hefsek. So if like what you described, I did my hefsek, my last bdika isn't good and I have to start shiva nikiyim again. I don't have to start with a hefsek. The first day could be considered day 1. Like if I did,
the hefsek has to be good in order for the shiva nikiyim to start. Is that your question?
Right. So I get that. Right. So if say in day 7, I forgot. Okay. I didn't do a bdika day 7, but I did my last bdika on day 2.
But you haven't had any bleeding in between?
Right.
I don't think you need a new hefsek.
You don't have to do a hefsek again?
No, because you still are functioning off of the hefsek you did 7 days ago. I know that sounds a little crazy, but you don't need a hefsek. You just need a new day 1 and day 7.
So my day 1 becomes my last bdika that I did.
Correct. Not recommended, just in case.
The day 1 doesn't necessarily have to be the day of the hefsek.
No, the day 1 should never be the day of the hefsek. The day 1 should always be the day after the hefsek. Let me go over that again.
After the morning
okay.
After the hefsek.
Right. Okay. I did my hefsek in my scenario. I did my hefsek on Friday. I must do bedika on Shabbos, right? And I must do bedika next Friday. The day of the week, I forgot to put this in the slide, so thank you for asking this question. This is like very key. The day of the week that I do my hefsek, a good hefsek, not just any hefsek, a hefsek that turned out to be good, that is the day of the week I'm going to the mikveh next week, which means, let's say I do my hefsek on Friday. So I'm going to go to the mikveh next Friday night, which means day 1 is Shabbos, day 2 is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday is now 7 days. I can go to the mikveh Friday night. Now that Friday is over and it's now really Saturday halachically, now I can go to the mikveh on Friday night. So my day 1 bedika is Shabbos morning and my day 7 bedika is Friday morning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, no problem. Did I answer your question? I feel like you were asking something different.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, good. Okay, so thank you for bringing that up because I totally forgot to put that in the slides. The day of the week you did your hefsek is the day of the week you're going to the mikveh. There is a discussion in the Gemara. It says in the pasuk v'safra la, she should count for herself. It's the same lashon, the same language that they use for Sfiras HaOmer. So the Gemara is like, oh, do we have to like count like each day of our shiva nikiyim? Like you're all gonna know we don't do this, but like today is day 1 of my 7 clean days. Today is day 2 of my 7 clean days, right? We don't do that. But there is an assumption that even though we don't have to actually out loud count the way we do Sfiras HaOmer in order to like get the mitzvah, we do have to have an awareness that it's our 7 clean days. So you don't need to know exactly, like if I stop you in the street and be like, hey, what day of your 7 clean days is it today? And you can't answer me, that's okay, right? You can be like, okay, wait, I did my bedika I did a hefsek on Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, today's Sunday, today's my 4th day, right? Like you can say that. But if you, I think I just counted that wrong. But if you, I have a chat. I'm gonna look at this after. Okay, if you count it, if you don't know what day it is, that's okay, but you have to know that it is your 7 clean days. You have to have a basic awareness of the 7 clean days. Why is that relevant? Let's say on day 3 I do bedika and it has a questionable color, right? It's not quite red, it's not quite brown, I'm not really sure what it is, and I need to drop it in the anonymous drop box outside the mikveh at Young Israel Hollywood, or put it in my mailbox or the Wine Sox mailbox, or send it over the Tahor app, or whoever it is that I ask, okay? So what do? with this like questionable status I'm in. Unfortunately, the rabbis do not always get back to us immediately. So what am I supposed to do? In the meantime, I should not assume that things are bad. I should not assume that I'm out. Because once I assume I'm nida again, you are nida. But once I assume that I'm bleeding again, you may, according to some opinions, have to start the count all over again because you lost your awareness that it's your 7 clean days. So you're supposed to kind of play like a little bit of like being on both sides at the same time. So you'd be like, the next badika I do is either my new hefsek or it's my next badika. If the badika comes back fine, the rabbi says it's all good, then the next badika I did was just my next badika for my 7 clean days. And if it wasn't, that will be my new hefsek. And then moving forward, I will start my new day 1 the next day. Okay, so that's the idea about awareness and about like counting. You do not need to count, but you do need to know that it's your 7 clean days. You do 1 or 2 badikot a day. Badikot are always done in daylight hours. The only time we don't do badikot in daylight hours is if you have a veset that's a nighttime veset, which we spoke about last week. Anybody who missed it, you can catch the recording. That would be the only time you would do a badika when it's dark out. Generally speaking, badikot are done if you do 2 a day, it's the morning and the afternoon, not the morning and the evening, the morning and the afternoon, okay, before sunset. Okay, let me just double check this chat. Okay, so can you use water or KY jelly on the badika cloth so it's not dry? This is like a big, huge debate. I've heard lots of different opinions. I was told that it's fine. You just want to make sure you don't put so much that it's like so drenched that any blood that like a small drop of blood that got on it might not even like show up. So you want to just put a little bit. I've heard other people say to put the KY jelly internally like half an hour before and then try to do it. But again, just a small amount in order to make the badika cloth like not so difficult to use. But there definitely are different opinions on this. So I just want to say that, like I know Machon Pua like does all these experiments where they take like a wet badika cloth and drop like red food coloring to try to prove to you that if you wet the badika cloth, it's not going to work. But other people say it's totally fine. So just be aware that these different opinions. These are the like science experiments my husband did in Smicha. They like brought in red food coloring and wet badika cloths. Anyways, okay. Any questions about the 7 clean days, the hefsek Taharat, any of that? Anybody at home? I can't see the chat again because I'm in full screen mode. Okay, good. No chats. Okay. Okay, the mikvah. I think what I'm gonna do, let's see how long this takes me. Okay, so this is where's the quote? Okay, there. This is a quote from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, Waters of Eden. It's a like small, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's like things. They were published by the Orthodox Union like years ago, but they're all these short booklets on like major issues in Judaism. So there's something on Mikva, there's something on Tefillin, there's something on Yerushalayim. They're like, you could read them in a Shabbos afternoon. They're like really cute, simple, not cute, but like really nice ideas, giving sort of the meaning behind mitzvah. So he has this book on Mikva, and he says this beautiful idea about the rivers that were in Gan Eden, and that there's this idea, we never hear about these rivers again. Like, why did the Torah even bother to tell us the names of all the rivers in Gan Eden? Like, who cares, right? Like, we're not going back there anytime soon. Well, hopefully we are, but like, we can give them new names. Like, who cares what the names of the rivers were? But the Gemara says that like all the water, like it basically flowed out and it says, and it flows to the east of Ashur, and the 4th river is Prat, right? So some of these are rivers we've heard of, and some of them aren't necessarily, but they all come from the Gan Eden, basically meaning the Gemara learns from that, the water that was in Gan Eden is the source of the water that's in like all the rivers and lakes today, which means that like when you're going to the mikvah, you are essentially, and this idea of the water cycle is a very cool idea when you think about it, that mikvah represents life. We'll talk about that in a second. The water cycle, like water just recycles and recycles and recycles and recycles. It's like the same water over and over again. It evaporates, it rains, it evaporates, it rains, right? Hashem is recycling the same water molecules through the world, like year after year and century after century. It's not really like newly created water. It's the same water over and over again. It represents this like kind of idea of like eternal life and being able to live forever. But the idea that when you go to the mikvah, you're basically establishing this link with Gan Eden. You're basically going into these natural waters that originate from these rivers that were in Gan Eden. It's like our way of getting the closest to our perfected state, to a place where like Adam and Chava, like pre their sin, and when we were in our like most perfected, newly created state, and that mikvah is an opportunity to reconnect to that. So You can read the quote afterwards. There's obviously, he says a lot more things, but I think there's a couple of ideas that kind of come up around mikvah. One of them is the idea of the womb and being reborn, and that when we go into the mikvah and submerge our entire body in water, we're essentially the same as a baby who's being reborn and comes out of their mother's like uterine sac full of water, right? They spend 9 months growing in water and then they come out of the water. The idea of going to the mikvah is this idea of rebirth, which is a perfect foil to the experience of tuma. Almost every kind of tuma, impurity that you come in across in the Torah, is related to some kind of either loss of life or loss of potential life. Down to having our period, it's a loss of potential life. It was the opportunity to have gotten pregnant. That egg didn't, meet its potential to become a human neshama or body, and it sheds out, and it's another month that we haven't had the opportunity to bring life into the world. Not that that necessarily would have been what that couple wanted that month or needed that month or could have handled that month, but it could have been a live person and it wasn't, so it's a loss of potential life. And so when we go to the mikvah, we are kind of like reconnecting to this idea of Gan Eden, to this idea of our perfected state, but we're also giving ourselves the opportunity to become reborn and enter the world after having this experience of distance from Hashem. When we think about it in terms of the Beis HaMikdash, when we had the Beis HaMikdash, if a person came in contact with a dead body, they couldn't go to the Beis HaMikdash. It wasn't so simple. Why? What's in the Beis HaMikdash? Hashem's presence. After experiencing death or encountering death, you're so, what's the word I'm looking for? Like jarred by the experience that you see it so real, like going to a funeral or seeing somebody who's just been lost or seeing a dead body, you had contact with a dead body. It's such a jarring experience. It's very hard to face Hashem in that place, from that emotional space. Somebody who's grieving needs time to like reconnect to Hashem and understand and make sense of the tragedy they've just been through. Whether it's somebody who died at 120 and had a long, fulfilling life, it's still sad when they pass away. Like it's still something you struggle with. And if it's an earlier tragedy that like lo aleinu, like is something really terrible, that's something that people need to process and they need time to be able to reconnect to Hashem. The Taharat process was enabling us to sort of like reconnect and sort of re-enter that relationship with Hashem. And we could only come back to the Beis HaMikdash once we'd gone through this process, depending whether it needed to be 1 day, 7 days, and go to the mikvah and have this rebirth and be able to go back and re-encounter Hashem and like be able to have that relationship again. Sometimes you need that distance in order to reconnect. So that's just sort of something to think about. And also just in terms of in the mikvah, a lot of women have the minhag that they say the Yehi Ratzon that's at the end of Shmona Esrei about the Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes I think people are like, this is so random. But if you think about it, like the only sort of thing we have left of our observance from temple times is mikvah. Like we can't do karbanos and we can't, like there's so much about what it was like to live at the time of the Beis HaMikdash. We daven 3 times a day that we should get it back, and none of us even know what we're davening for. We don't understand what it is and what it felt like and what it would be like. And I just like imagine like going to do the Korban Pesach with my kids and then like standing in line and like it's worse than Disney World. Like everybody's fetching and like waiting their turn for their Korban, and it's like, I'm like, I want this. And I also really hope that you make it easier than it sounds like, because it doesn't sound easy, And there's this element of when we go to the mikvah, that's like the one thing we still have left that's like really, truly connected to the way life was in the time of the Beis HaMikdash. And that's what we're davening for when we're in the mikvah. Like, let us experience all of it. Let us bring that back and be able to like reconnect to you in that way, which is, more of a conversation for like the Tishb time of year, but like, what is it that we're mourning for and longing for? And like, why is that meaningful? Okay, mikvah. What time is it? Okay. We're going to do when, and we're going to talk about like preparation and everything next time, because I don't want to keep people too long. Okay, so you are never ever Tohora without immersion in a mikvah, regardless of how long has passed. So this is really important to realize. You do not need to continue to do bedikos. Let's say you're in a situation, I don't know, you're like traveling and you have no way to get to a body of water, you have no way to get to a mikvah, and you are finishing your shiva nikiyim, but there's no way you can go to the mikvah for another 3 days until you get home, okay? Once your 7 clean days is over, put on your colored underwear, don't look when you wipe, all of those things. You cannot be with your husband. You cannot do any of the Harhakos, like you cannot break the Harhakos. You are still tme'ah. You still cannot be together until you go in the mikvah, but you are not required to like stay in the shiva nikiyim 7 clean day like sense of life. You can move on from that and you can go to the mikvah. They don't need to be connected to each other. But once you are tme'ah, once you lose your Tohora status, your pure status, I don't like the words pure and impure, I'm just using them for those of you who don't know the Hebrew. Once you lose that status, you can't get it back without a mikvah. You must go to a mikvah. In terms of what counts as a mikvah, a place that is a kosher mikvah is the easiest place to go because that's like a guarantee. In terms of natural bodies of water, oceans are for sure fine. When it comes to lakes and rivers, it gets a little bit more complicated, and it's worth just figuring out exactly where you are, what kind of lake it is. It has to originate from like some kind of a spring underneath, or it has to be running water. There's like certain requirements. So you sometimes ask a question. Don't assume every lake is fine. If it's a man-made lake, it's not so simple. So just make sure you are asking the right people those kinds of questions. So once you go to the mikvah, then you become Tohora. But you need the Taharat process. You need a hefsek, you need 7 clean days, and you need the mikvah in order to become Tohora. You can do as many 7 clean days as you want. If you never go in a mikvah, like that's it. There's nothing that can help you. And similarly, if you never do any bedikot and you go in the mikvah, that's not really going to help you. So it's just something to realize. Okay, it should be at night. There's a whole discussion in the Shulchan Aruch about why this is the case, but for our intents and purposes, we will talk about Fridays in a minute, but it should be at night. And it should be after day 7. Okay, so like we said in my scenario, I did my hefsek on Friday. I did a shiv and akiyim bedikot every day on Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Holding my water bottle. Thursday, Friday. I have now 7 days of bedikot. I can go to the mikvah after day 7 ends, which is Friday night. Right? Friday day was my last of my 7 clean days. Once the sun sets, now it is the 8th day. I can go then. Okay. This is the ideal time to go to the mikvah. It's a discussion whether it's an actual mitzvah to go to the mikvah on time. I think the way the Shulchan Aruch basically comes out is it's not a mitzvah to go to the mikvah on time, but we want you to go to the mikvah on time because there are other mitzvot that you're pushing off by not going to the mikvah on time, like the mitzvah of ona, which is the mitzvah of being intimate with your spouse, and the mitzvah of pru'arvu, which is having children. Those mitzvot will be pushed off if you don't go to the mikvah on time. But going to the mikvah on time in and of itself is not a chiyuv. You should not leave your own brother's wedding and have your mother never speak to you again because you disappeared for an entire dance set to like run down the street and take off all your makeup that you just spent $100 getting done to go to the mikvah just to cause this whole family whatever when you and your husband both understand and realize that it's okay. So my rule of thumb is generally it needs to be a conversation. You and your husband should be on the same page. You should agree with each other about it. You shouldn't just decide unilaterally that you're not going to the mikvah tonight and not let him be a part of the conversation. But if you have a real strong reason why you can't go to the mikvah right now, one of them being if you have COVID, you cannot go to the mikvah right now, then that would be a reason to delay. So the mitzvah of going to the mikvah on time, it is important. You should prioritize it. If you find that month after month, you're pushing it off because it's just inconvenient and it's just whatever, that needs like a reassessment as a couple of like what's going on with your relationship and why aren't you prioritizing this more? I know like when I was first married, mikvah night was like a whole event. My husband would make dinner and we'd have like a whole night together. Now it's like a lot harder to like make that happen between extracurricular activities, things going on in the shul. Like it's not always possible to make it like an amazing, exciting night where we can spend the whole night and have a whole date night and whatever, but we don't push it off. We try everything we can to make it work. Sometimes there have been situations where I've paid extra money to go to a mikvah late because I wanted to go on time. Those things are all within the realm of normal. But if it's something you have to do like all the time, or it's becoming really, really disruptive to like your baby's nursing schedule or whatever, like you and your husband need to sit down and have a conversation and figure out some solutions. But you don't need to feel like you need to like cause, a family fight because you left your brother's wedding or any of those other types of scenarios in order to go to the mikvah on time. The only situation where some people allow the mikvah during the day is a kala before she's married, and situations where you cannot access the mikvah. I know I'm going to say something very groundbreaking here. You cannot access a mikvah on Friday night, and for safety reasons, you can't access the mikvah, or it's in another town and you can't drive or whatever it is. That's where the real allowance came from opening mikvahs on Friday afternoon. The origin of the minhag of our mikvah of opening on Friday afternoon is long predates me and it long predates Rabbi Weinstock. We really, really encourage people when they ask us to go Friday night. That is definitely halachically ideal. We very much encourage that. If you have extenuating circumstances that you just can't make it happen, you do need to know that even though you've gone to the mikvah early, your 7 clean days are not over until the stars are out, and you and your husband are not even supposed to see each other once you've gone in the mikvah on Friday afternoon until the stars come out Friday night. because of the concern of the confusion and the excitement that you've already gone to the mikvah. But until your 7 clean days are complete, full halachic days, your tahara does not kick in. And so it's very, very important that if you are going to take advantage of that leniency that exists at our mikvah, that you know that that halacha is very, very serious and important to be aware of, and that just because you went to the mikvah early doesn't mean you're tahar early. You're not. So you have to be very cautious about that, figuring out the childcare situation. If anybody ever wants to drop their kids off at my house on a Friday afternoon because of this issue, or a Friday evening to go to the mikvah, like just call me. I might not live close enough to you to make it worth it, but like, don't let that be the reason you don't go to the mikvah on Friday night. My kids will gladly play with yours, assuming they don't have COVID, because we really want to go to Canada next week. That's sort of like the reality of the Friday afternoon thing. The real origin of that kula is a situation of a woman who doesn't live walking distance to a mikvah, or it's unsafe for her to walk alone at night and can't go on a Friday night. And that's where that really comes from. Different mikvah have different perspectives on this. Like our mikvah is as lenient as it gets about this. There are other mikvah that won't allow it unless it's a truly extenuating circumstance. I had a situation when I was living in New Jersey. I wanted to go on a Friday afternoon because the mikvah wasn't close to the campus where we were working. And the rav of that mikvah basically said, just go Saturday night. In the end, I couldn't get a good hefsek the day I thought I was going to get one, and I had to go to the mikvah Saturday night anyway. So Hashem was like helping me out so that I wouldn't be frustrated. But it's not everybody agrees that Friday afternoon is legit. So sorry to burst everybody's bubble, but if you're asking, it's definitely better not to. Is it not kosher? No, it's kosher. Your tevila counts. It's fine, but don't see each other until the stars are out. And if you make that appointment for Friday afternoon, I hope, and those of you who have, you should be getting a message from the mikvah letting you know what time that is, so that you're fully aware of what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to stop here. We will continue. Let me make sure that's true. Hold on. Yes. Okay, we're going to continue next time talking about how to prepare for the mikvah, very quickly about how to dunk for the mikvah. And then we'll move on to a discussion about like sort of a hashkafic conversation about intimacy in Judaism, and Q&A. I'm going to send out a form tomorrow. Like I'll send it around on WhatsApp. I'll send it out through the shul email with anonymous questions for people to put in any questions or issues that they want me to discuss next time. And I'll do the Q&A as well. Any questions from people at home? Okie dokes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.
No problem. Have a good night, everybody.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.